Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lori Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
So we're here with Allison Warner from Beacon Point. And Allie, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Lori. Happy to be here.
So I'm going to start out with a question near and dear to my heart. I actually love reading, and I gather good book suggestions from just about, I've got a stack about 10 high on my bedside table. So tell me, what's your favorite?
It's funny, you and I are the same. I have an e-note in my phone of all the books I hope to read over the coming months, days, and years, although I have a 1-year-old, so I don't get a lot of leisurely reading time now. But one of my favorites is The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. It's an incredible story actually based in the United States in rural Midwest area about bringing books to different communities, lower income communities. It's a woman leading the charge. She rides on horseback all throughout. I love horses and all sorts of outdoor activities, and just like her perseverance and challenging the status quo and doing good through education. It's based on a true story, and you learn a lot about the history of the United States. It's really, really cool.
Oh, I love that.
Citizens of London and the Alice Network. Citizens of London are the key American players supporting Churchill in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Alice Network is 2 female spies for Great Britain and infiltrating in World War II as well. And, you know, it's no surprise that 2 of the top 3 have some pretty incredible female leaders of their times.
Well, you know the way to my heart for sure. I love getting those strong female influences in there. So thanks. That's great. I'll add them to my book list. I just order them and they get there and I put them in my stack. So
I think you'll really like them. So you'll have to let me know once you read them, what your thoughts are.
Sure. So let's talk just a little bit about your journey. Tell me how you got where you're at, where you came from. Talk to me about.
Sure. Well, I'll try and keep it short and sweet, but I was a big nerd jock, student athlete as a child. I did competitive volleyball and competitive horseback riding in conjunction with obviously being a devoted student. I graduated from the University of Southern California, business undergrad, and I got my master's in communication management at USC as well. I started interning at Beacon Point when I was getting my graduate degree. It's funny, you couldn't really have paid me any amount of money to think I'd work in finance. I just shied away from the investment banking side of things. That's all I knew coming out of undergrad college as a financial career path. And I got an opportunity to intern at Beacon Point. I started cold calling on the institutional side of the business. Had no idea what I was doing, but I was learning from really great people. And through that internship, I realized that wealth management, if done right, really can help people on their path to leaving a legacy and their own version of financial freedom. And so I actually saw those services applicable in real life and not just on a test per se, if you will, in class. So while I'm in marketing and I focus on marketing, I obviously understand the business to support our advisors who support our clients. So that was 13 years ago when I started interning for Beacon Point. We had 1 office and 22 people. No departments existed at that point in time. And here we are 13 years later with 50 offices, almost 500 team members around the country, and more than 30 billion in assets under management, and definitely a marketing department.
That's a crazy trajectory. I bet you that must have fed your spirit if you're kind of an adventurer, you know, that high growth kind of gets you excited.
Yeah. You know, it's been high energy, fast pace. You know, as a millennial, people say, gosh, you've been at the same place for so long. You know, that's weird. And I say, well, great people doing great things together. You spend so many hours in a day working with these people, and I respect them. I learn from them. I hope the same, mutual relationship there. And I really do consider them like my work family, and our work culture has been great. And frankly, my role, even though I've quote unquote been the head of the marketing department since day one, even as an intern, it's changed a lot. It's evolved as the company grows. So I've held a lot of different positions and worn a lot of different hats, all leading the marketing department. And there's some thrill in building something from scratch.
Yeah.
It's a little nervy and scary sometimes, but it's really empowering and exciting. And when you see the fruits of your labor coming to fruition, it's pretty neat.
Fearless. That's the word I'd use. Fearless. What do you think is the best through that journey? Looking back, what do you think is the best investment you made in yourself, like sort of led to your success?
Yeah, good question. I actually think it started a little bit before that. And there's a funny story that was kind of like an aha moment for me early on in my career. But I was fortunate enough to learn from my wonderful parents, building confidence, and that they taught me and told me I could do anything and be anything I wanted. And so I was lucky to have that structure and support system from day one. My sports also taught me a lot about being my own leader and knowing when to be a team member, but also confidence and not being afraid to fail.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a roadmap or instruction set or a manual that I got to just tap into. I had to create that myself and learn myself. And did I make mistakes along the way? Yes. And that's where my wonderful mentors, our CEO and our president of our firm, they say, learn from your mistakes. It's all good, and they were really supportive. And so that confidence allowed me to grow and take risks, and I wouldn't have had that if I wasn't in stressful situations in match point or in the final four, or, caring for a teammate or stepping up when somebody needed me to step in so they could recalibrate, or any of these dynamic real-time situations that you're doing under duress or stress. Just kind of you become a cool cucumber while the adrenaline is flowing. And again, in a corporate environment, it gave me the confidence to pitch my ideas to the board as an intern and ask if I could run with projects, even though I really had no idea what I was doing. I'd learn along the way and just kind of put myself out there. And if I didn't have that confidence, and, sometimes I was probably overconfident, I had no idea what I was doing, but that gave me an opportunity to show what I could do. And of course I did it with a place of being humble and for the good of the company, and not just for me. There was bigger vision involved with that, and a respect for my elders and for those that are in the company who started this. But there was a lot there that was created leading into that. And my aha story, if you will, it's funny, I was an intern and I was talking with our president, Matt Cooper, and one of our other founding managing directors, Graham Pierce. And I, at the time, didn't put my email on my phone yet. I was like, work and life are separate. I am establishing this boundary. It was Friday and we're having this conversation. Like, if you're going to be a real player here, you need to be 100% all in. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to take the weekend to think about it and I'll let you know on Monday, kind of thing. And sure enough, I come back on Monday and I put my email on my phone and I said, I'm all in. I'm totally a part of this team. I'm all in. And that kind of established their respect for me and vice versa. And it opened up doors and opportunities since I was fully invested. And, the great thing is it actually gave me less anxiety to see what was coming through on the weekends. I didn't have to respond. I can set my boundaries and establish my time, but I was ready to roll come Monday and I knew what was going to be on my docket, and it just helped me manage my life a little bit. So silly little things like that, but poignant moments in my life that have led to my success today.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like thinking about that and kind of that all in idea, where the idea of having that confidence, that's something that women in business specifically is kind of an issue, is that a lot of times we won't ask for a raise. We don't ask for those things that we want. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you would say that other than the sports, which sounds amazing? I am not good at any one of those.
It's okay. I have plenty of colleagues that never played sports and are doing great. So
what else what would you say builds that confidence, or how would you?
That's a really great question. It's true. I mean, you see women, if they're looking at a job and they think they only meet 3 of the 10 criteria, they won't apply. Mm-hmm. Where, if they don't have 9 of the 10 criteria, they won't apply. They have to have 10 out of the 10, where men may have 3 of the 10 and they think they're ready to rock and roll. And the reality of that situation is both the male and female candidate are probably great. It's just a matter of where they come at with their personal confidence. And it's, to your point, I kind of came into the career world with that from experiences ahead of time. But if you don't have necessarily any of those experiences, I would find a mentor who has had some of those experiences, or who can impart some of those examples, or kind of help that individual pre-experience or visualize. I mean, that's another thing I always anticipated and visualized how my match would go, or what I needed to do to win, or whatever the case may be. So if you can proactively think of yourself in situations, if you're going into a meeting and you're the only female in the room, make sure you get a table at that conference room seat. Don't sit in the back corner. and own your presence, and just little things like that. If there's if you're part of a committee and there's a project, take the lead. There's other ways that you can kind of get some of those leadership, confidence building experiences. Extracurricular activities, if you haven't done sports and you want to, there's, now that COVID's over, you can join co-ed leagues and other things to get you some of those practical environments and situations. But I think you can learn a lot from a mentor if you haven't had those exact role-playing situations. We can talk through that and try and build that confidence and do it in baby steps and different examples in your day-to-day.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm reading a book right now called Do It Scared. And that's kind of their theory is start. Oh. It's going to be a little uncomfortable. It's going to give you a few butterflies in your stomach. Do it anyway. Try it.
It's funny. That's what I think about change. Everybody is in constant change. And my philosophy is change is uncomfortable until it becomes normal. Mm-hmm. And therefore change is not scary because I know at the end of the tunnel, it's going to feel normal. So I just got to keep going through it and just pushing through. And it's kind of a bulldozer approach, but it's worked really well for me. Again, everybody has different approaches and different personality types, but I'm not afraid of that. To your point, like people can be scared going through a process, but know that you're going to get to the other side and you're going to weather that storm and you're going to be better for it. So try and embrace it and maybe enjoy it a little as you go through that, Yeah. That's been really helpful. That mental discipline, that's also part of the, the sports part, has been hugely beneficial. So if you can manifest that through a lot, that's another great idea, through books and reading and other examples. But that mental discipline and structure has been hugely beneficial in my career.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good thoughts there. So what is the worst advice someone gave you? And did you take it or learn something from it?
It's funny. I did the Schwab Executive Leadership Program when I was young. It was wonderful. Some of the top RIA firms were permitted to submit, potential candidate to do that. And our CEO, Shannon UC, who I love dearly as a human being and as a leader of our company, submitted me for the course. It was the second year they'd done it. Now it's been for 10 plus years. But at first I was told I was too young and that I shouldn't do the class or the program. It was a year-long program with weekly courses and homework. It was a mini grad program, if you will. Yeah. And Shannon and I both said, no, she's going to do this. And I was like, I'm totally doing this. And it was more a chip on my shoulder to prove them wrong. And I did it and it was great. I thrived in that class. They saw me thrive. I'm still great friends with my professors and industry colleagues. And so no, I didn't take that advice.
And better for it. Yeah. I love that. So what about looking back on where you come from? What are some of the lessons that you've learned, or maybe a situation that you wish you would have handled differently at the time, but you changed because of the way that you handled it? Talk to me about some of that.
Yeah, I think especially from a female perspective, there's always 4 million things we can be doing in different facets of our life. We juggle a lot of balls in the air at the same time. And that continues. It's funny, as you're starting out in your career, you think you're juggling a lot, but just wait till you get married and have a kid, try and do all of life's things, right? And early on, I was almost addicted to my checklist. Like, I have to get literally everything done today. And while I still have that, let's go full speed ahead mentality, I really kind of put some discipline around that and said, here's what I'm going to tackle today. This will be here tomorrow. And be present in what I'm doing, whether that's with my family or with my work and with my team. I think situations and how you look at your career, I recommend doing like the Strength Finders 2.0 or some of those different, quantitative and qualitative overview of your personality type and what your greatest strengths and your greatest weaknesses are, because I really do think greatest strengths can be your greatest weaknesses and vice versa. Yeah. And it's really interesting if you do it early on and then you take it again 5 or 10 years later to see how you might have evolved. I did that early on in my career and actually in grad school. And then I did it like a decade later. And there were some fine tuning adjustments in some of my key strengths. And it was kind of neat to see the evolution of that and the practice discipline of trying to expand in some areas and maybe pull back in a few others. And so one of my greatest strengths, which I also at that time thought, was potentially a greatest weakness, is not being present. And I am so good at anticipating what's happening 20 steps ahead and preparing for that sometimes I forget to be in the moment and recognize the wins recognize the people I'm doing this with. And I know that seems kind of fluffy, but it's really important because the last thing I want to do is blink and be 70 or 80 and say like, what did I do this all for? And so I've made a conscious effort in both my career and my family to try and be present. And it is an active daily discipline because it's so easy to just think about what's happening in 6 months down the road and forget about Thanksgiving tomorrow or New Year's the next day or whatever the case may be,
Yeah. I get that. I'm a very goal-driven sort of person too.
Yep.
And so you have your checklist, you've got your goals, you're full steam ahead. And sometimes you do forget that part of the joy of doing what you're doing is learning along the way and meeting people and spending time with them and being present with them. So I love that idea.
Yep. Exactly. It's really important. And a funny metaphor, you can take the freeway the whole time, but every now and then it's important to get off the exit and take the back roads. And then you come back to the freeway because you learn a lot about the surrounding areas, the different approaches to doing the same thing. You're still going to get to your destination, but those pit stops are valuable.
Yeah. Valuable in and of themselves, not just, they add and enrich your life. I always say, don't do something you hate for 45 years. That's a really long time to do something you dislike.
True statement.
If you could go back and talk to yourself at the beginning of your journey, what would you tell yourself? What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
It's crazy. When I started out, we hadn't even started, the acquisition process of that side of our business, to grow this fast. And it's funny, I was thinking on this and I don't know if I changed what I did knowing the scale that we've grown because I always built our marketing department with the foundational element of scale. Mm-hmm. But I think I would have told myself, don't be afraid to fail and learn from your mistakes and turn them into successes because I had a level of like perfectionism that was just, again, the achievement model, right? And I took some of those failures so to heart that it took me a minute to bounce back. I did bounce back, but I just think for us goal-oriented type of individuals, we can be really hard on ourselves. I think, that level of perfectionism shows in our work and shows in our relationships, mm-hmm. but just not having that fear of failure because you can totally pivot that into something that is a success. And also that there's not one right way to do something. Like your path is going to evolve. So don't be afraid to pick a path. And then if you got to pivot, you can do so. I think you can be what I call a squatter, right? If you're afraid if you're at the fork in the road and you're not sure which way to go, it's okay to choose a path and then, come back. Excuse me. But those are kind of the 20-year-old. I just had so much pressure to make the right decision and make the right answer. I needed to know exactly what I was going to do in my career at 20 years old. And you just have no idea.
Yeah, I know. I had one of my assistants is very, very goal driven and doesn't like to miss any of her goals that she sets. And one time she was busy doing other things that were more important, quite frankly, than the goals she had set. And she came to me and said, hey, I missed my goal. And I'm like, well, great. And she kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? But it did give her the chance to kind of learn to set more realistic so she didn't try and kill herself getting the goals done. More goals that were driving her more towards the successes that she wanted in her life. And you don't learn those things until you mess it up every once in a while.
No, and some goals may appear along the way that weren't there on the list to start. So that's okay too, And I think that the moral of the story is goals are great so you keep moving forward, but allow for space to open up other opportunities and other initiatives, other projects and other things in your life that may not have blossomed sooner that can come up along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that idea of being present in the moment and kind of taking advantage of those along the way, those relationships or those opportunities or those friends or those moments. So I love that.
Yep.
Yeah. What scared you the most?
Honestly, the financial services industry was scary to me. It wasn't going into a room of an entire board and presenting as an intern. Like I said, I asked to do that. I wasn't told to do that. I kind of enjoyed those experiences. A lot of people would cringe and run away. That was probably blind confidence, but and look, I have two really successful parents who have had their own careers in real estate finance, and my mom was a lawyer at her own law firm for 20 years. And so I'm very well versed in finance and business and all of my internships and my classes, but they're just, and I'm hoping that stigma is starting to fall in the financial services industry, but I was scared to roll into the financial services investment advisory firm office, and just all the verbiage and the jargon and just all the stuff that really didn't matter scared me. Obviously, when I walked through the doors and realized they were great human beings behind it, and I learned the language and in due time, and those ancillary elements didn't care. But that's a big part of what my team and I try and debunk, especially for women, is those scary kind of stereotypical things about our industry that really shouldn't matter and shouldn't keep, women from coming to the table alongside their male counterparts, and also women who are looking for a financial advisor feeling empowered how to ask the questions that they need to know that they're not getting taken advantage of on fees or the allocations or whatever the case may be related to their financial plan and their investment portfolios. We absolutely are trying to break that kind of stereotypical nature of the big bad financial institution. That's not what it's about.
Yeah. I'd be interested in hearing just a little bit more about that, because I know that you do some research into women specifically, in finance and stuff like that. And I know that one of the books that I read just recently talks about how girls and boys are kind of the same. They're given the same message up to a certain point. And then at some point, girls are told they're not good at math, right? And
STEM would say otherwise.
Yeah. And so talk to me about some of that research or some of the more interesting pieces.
Yeah. So it's really evolved. We founded our Women's Advisory Institute back in 2011. So that was over a decade ago. And the industry did think we were kind of crazy for doing so. But we really wanted, and again, I'm talking in stereotypes for the sake of our conversation, but we really wanted spouses to be part of that conversation. And frankly, our male clients want their spouses to be part of those conversations. And so we do this as much for our male clients as we do our female clients.
Yeah.
Statistically speaking, women live longer than men. And so if we're doing financial planning for a family or a husband and a wife, we're the male in that relationship wants to make sure the female counterpart is taken care of should they pass away before their wife. So, it's really actually a synergistic approach on that front. We work with women on life transitions like the passing of a spouse and widowhood, divorce. That's a whole nother can of worms that people go through and need guidance from advisors they can trust and coordination around that team with their lawyer, their advisor. There's tax implications. There's a lot of different things that they may not even know to ask. And that obviously multi-generational family planning and legacy planning as trillions of dollars transfer to next gen. And a lot of that next gen happens to be female. So helping those families think through what that looks like, creating family missions, making sure that, again, there's tax efficiencies in those transfers, and supporting that next gen in their financial literacy and their journey to empower their family legacy is all part of that Women's Advisory Institute. And, what's really, really cool too is our male advisors have really grabbed hold of this as well. And I emphasize that because I think our industry sometimes divides and conquers, women only and men only. And it's just not, it shouldn't be that. It's really rooted in education. Yeah. And it's been really cool to see the male advisors in the last couple of years understand that and feel comfortable with it. And again, that might be Beacon Point specific. We're women focused, but not at the expense of men.
Right.
And it's really rooted in education and engagement and empowerment. So it's been a lot of fun to see that evolve, and it will continue to evolve. And that's a little bit of insight to those life milestones that we really help with.
Yeah, I love that idea. And that's what, when I talk about my podcast and encouraging young women, a lot of times I get, feedback. Well, don't you like guys? Well, yes. And you know what? More importantly, I think that our husbands, our fathers,
absolutely,
those are our uncles. They want their girls to grow up and have these dreams, anything they can desire. And another group that is coming online is the woman entrepreneur.
Yes, very much so.
Women taking control of their business, the C-suite, and that kind of, we're not left out of the actual making of the money now either. So
that's very much involved. Yes. So that's great. Yes. And business owners is definitely an area that we focus too, because there's a lot of different elements to being an entrepreneur to make sure that you're being as savvy as possible as you're building a business and what that looks like as that C-suite leader. So you're absolutely right. So it's a fun time to be in our industry. It's an exciting time. And I just, everybody could benefit from having a financial advisor. Just making sure that that financial advisor has your best interest at heart, male, female, or otherwise, is really important.
Right, right. And I find that a lot of times with my women clients, a lot of times they're more willing to ask questions. They're more willing to, sometimes their husbands, sometimes they're a little embarrassed to ask the question
It's so interesting you say that. So it's the same answer that they're trying to get to that we've, in client meetings, but how the question is asked is very different. A lot of times men are much more quantitative. They want to know the percentage return of their portfolio, and women want to know, can we afford to send our children to college? But at the end of the day, the portfolio has to perform to the correct level to allow for funds to do what they want to do in their financial plan. So to your point, is just making sure that the advisor is educated on speaking to both counterparts in the meeting to get to the same answer. And that's what we love about, we lead with financial planning, because so many of those qualitative questions that somebody may be embarrassed to ask matter in how we build their plan and how we build their investment portfolio. And so I think advisors can learn from that and say, ask those questions, build the relationships with your clients so that you can ask those questions, whether they be embarrassing, uncomfortable, or whatever, like that it's money, but it's really a personal relationship.
Yeah, I agree. I think I personally think finance is super fun and exciting. I'm not sure everybody feels that way, but I love it. And
awesome.
And if I can get someone else on board to kind of ask the questions or delve into that, I'm convinced everyone will think it's fun if they just try.
I think that's great.
So, what is the thing that you are most proud of?
Oh my gosh. It's my son. He is just the light of my life. I never take him for granted every day. He just turned 1, actually 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't do life without my husband. He's incredible. And just to see him be a dad is like my pride and joy. So I count my blessings every day for my family and their health. And, I look back in the last 30 years and it's family is number one. But I have to say I'm proud of my achievements in my sports realm. My sister and I were the only sister duo in the history of USC to play on the volleyball court at the same time. Being in the Final Four is pretty rare air. So, some of those achievement-oriented things with some trophies at the end of it were definitely a pride thing, but it's definitely my family.
Yeah.
And of course, what we've built at Beacon Point is definitely on there too. I'm very proud of our marketing department and our entire team. But when I say team, not just my team, but everybody at the company, it's really, really cool to see what we built and maintain the culture. That is something I'm very proud of.
Yeah. Yeah. I do a lot of that here as well, where we try to keep the culture as we grow. And I think that my sweet spot is empowering people to succeed. So I love watching them be
You're right spot on.
Yeah. So
if you don't have culture, you don't really have anything. Honestly, we can build the operational and the marketing and the reports and everything. But if you don't like who you work with and you don't want to show up and bring your best every day, what is the point?
Yeah. And again, with that 45 years worth of doing something you just like, it just leads to not a happy life. And we want our employees happy, healthy, and excited about finance.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So any advice for the young ladies watching this podcast, someone who isn't where you're at with your success already, but someone who's just starting down her path, what would you say?
Yeah, I look back to that beginning, and I actually share this with some of our interns who intern for us today. Be your own advocate and stretch outside your comfort zone. So when I say that, and again, where you're working or your internship, sometimes it's culture oriented, but I'll just give a tangible example. Beacon Point, I proactively looked at people's work calendars. In some meetings, I wanted to sit in on to learn or do informational interviews because I wanted to learn how they got to where they are at that point in time. And I proactively reached out in a professional email manner, introducing myself, explaining who I was at the company as an intern, and asked if I could learn about them or shadow them in a meeting. And this was not part of the internship program. This is just me being me and wanting to learn more. And you'd be surprised how many people are open to that. And of course, I got some no's, just totally fine, where they said, not this meeting, but how about this meeting? Depending on the client who was in the room, if they'd be okay with me shadowing or whatever the case may be. So if you don't put yourself out there, Like that's a way to advance and also build your confidence and learn. I especially think about folks starting out now in a post-pandemic world that, it's different. We're here and sitting in 2D and I was in 3D all the time in the office, and we're back in the office a lot, and it's so great to see people. But a lot of folks that are in hybrid roles or not in the office, it's really hard to be seen and really hard to get integrated into projects and opportunities where you can show your leadership and get outside your comfort zone and stretch that boundary of, of that box you're comfortable in. So be proactive on that front and try things that will grow your brain, grow your heart, grow your mind. It'll serve you well.
Yeah, I like that. Always be learning, right? Always be growing.
Yeah, that curiosity factor is really important so that you don't become stale in these different facets of who you are as a person. You can always be learning.
Yeah, I have kids and they'll come in and ask me, they get their first job or their first big boy job and come in and say, Mom, what should I do with my 401k? And that is that.
Oh my gosh, you must be so proud.
I know. I am like, let me tell you. And then about a half an hour, 45 minutes later, they're like, Mom, I got it. I don't want to know any more today.
So, oh my gosh, that's so great.
But I do love that. I love that teaching aspect.
Yeah. Well, speaking of teaching, we have a 6-week course that we run called Foundations of Finance. And I took this as an intern 13 years ago. And then I was the TA to the class. It's all generated in-house from our team of advisors around the country. And we posted on our Beacon Point YouTube channel, and it's open to anyone. There's no homework or anything. It's just great learning. And and we put it together for the sake of helping those that don't learn it in school or don't learn it at home or whatever the case may be, can be empowered to get a great foundation to their personal finance.
Oh, that's really interesting.
I'm happy to share the link if you want to put it in your show notes or anything fun.
Yeah, that's great. That would be great. So, well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you taking the time out and doing this with me and sharing your insight. And I appreciate the thoughtful answers to the questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lori, for having me. I think what you're doing is wonderful. And it's great to see men and women in our industry thriving. And we want to continue that trajectory. And you're doing some wonderful things for the women in finance. And we thank you for it.
Hopefully. So thanks so much.